In October of 2021, the Crawford Park District, in partnership with the state of Ohio's H2Ohio Project, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, and the Ohio EPA, opened the newest park in Crawford County, the Sandusky Headwaters Preserve. Located just west of Crestline, Ohio, the preserve encompasses approximately 38 acres along the banks of the Sandusky River. The Sandusky watershed includes parts of 12 Ohio counties and empties into the Sandusky Bay and ultimately Lake Erie just north of Fremont, Ohio. In addition to being designated a state scenic river in 1970, it is also home to Ohio's largest population of inland bald eagles. The Headwaters Project began to take shape with the acquisition of land along the banks of the Sandusky River, very near its source in Love Oak Park in Crestline, Ohio. Josh Dyer, director of the Crawford Park District, explains.
It started with a small parcel donation from Sharon and Norm Huber, a small little plot along the Sandusky River, and it started getting larger. We purchased property from Russell Long, about 7 acres, and the initial idea for the 7 acres of the Russell Long property was overflow parking for our large events that we have here at Love Oak Park. And then in 2017, Betty Tucker phoned the Park District and was ready to sell her 30-acre tract that then completed the whole of the Sandusky Headwaters Preserve.
Once the land was acquired, a plan for its usage was needed. Josh tells the story.
I received a phone call from Division of Wildlife in the fall of 2019 asking if I could come up with a proposal for some wetland construction. And I asked them how soon they needed it, and they said, well, yesterday would have been good, but as soon as you can. So I worked up a proposal for some wetlands in the bottomland of Sandusky Headwaters Preserve and applied for some H2Ohio funds. We were one of over 100 applicants and proposals for the initial phase of the H2Ohio program, and we were one of 24 that were selected as the initial phase for the H2Ohio program.
Mark Dilley, wetland scientist and president of the Ohio Wetlands Association, explains what a wetlands is and what are the unique features that define them.
So a wetland in its simplest terms is simply land that is wet. It's just a compound word to indicate areas of the landscape that tend to collect water for extended periods of time. They have prolonged saturation or inundation during the growing season that affects the formation of the plant community. From a regulatory standpoint, the way we define wetlands, according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers definition, is it's any area that that meets 3 criteria. It has to have a dominance of wetland vegetation. It has to have evidence of wetland hydrology, which is inundation or saturation during the growing season, and then hydric soils, which are soils that are transformed due to the frequent saturation and inundation that show evidence of that hydrology and actually change both chemically and physically as a result of that inundation.
Now that we know what a wetlands is, let's find out more about the H2Ohio Project and why wetlands are so important to its success.
It's an exciting time in the world of wetlands here in the state of Ohio because of this H2Ohio program. The program itself launched through the current administration at the state level. Governor DeWine and his folks felt that we needed a concerted effort to put wetlands back on the landscape to help to alleviate some of the problems we've been seeing with harmful algal blooms in a lot of our major waterways, and in particular the western basin of Lake Erie. So this funding source was established to really increase the rate of wetland restoration in Ohio, to put more wetlands on the landscape to help capture nutrients and take some of the pressure off of our waterways in terms of the nutrient loading, which is the root cause of why we have these harmful algal blooms. In our state, we've lost over 90% of our wetlands since European settlement. We're number 2 in the nation in wetland loss, and we're feeling the effects of those losses now because we're kind of fast-tracking a lot of nutrients into our waterways, and there it fuels the algal growth to the point where we have issues like the Toledo water plant had, where they had to actually shut down because the toxin levels from these harmful algal blooms were so high that they couldn't clean water sufficiently to make it safe for the public to drink.
Scott Butterworth, District 2 Manager for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, further explains.
In the H2Ohio program, there's 4 main state agencies that are involved. There's the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, and then the Lake Erie Commission are the 4 state agencies that work together as a team to try and solve the water quality issues.
Agriculture is very important in Ohio. It's very important, especially here in Crawford County. Ag is, a huge industry here in Crawford County. There are things that the agriculture does put on the landscape that sometimes isn't the best for the waterways, water courses in Ohio. So putting wetlands on the landscape, this does help absorb some of those phosphates and nitrates that agriculture does put on the land. There are timelines that they should apply fertilizers and manure spreading, but sometimes you can't foresee a huge rain event coming after you have applied fertilizers on the ground. It didn't give them a time to work into the soil to be useful to the plant. So, they might run off into our water courses. By having wetlands on the landscape to capture that runoff, the wetland acts like a filter or a sponge of sorts to absorb that, and then a filter as that water percolates then down through the water column and then into the Sandusky River. So the nutrient reduction is the main thrust of the H2Ohio project, and having those wetlands out there is the key component to that.
After having determined the best use for the land that was to become the Sandusky Headwaters Preserve, what was necessary to make sure the land was suited for our wetlands, and how was it laid out?
So the first thing you need if you're going to build a wetland is what they call hydric soils. And these are usually soils that are high in clay content and can hold water. So think about places in your yard or a field when you're out, that after a rain the water collects there, so that most likely has the proper soils. And then what we need is, if there is a source of water from something, from a field or a stream, that we can divert into that wetland to give the water time to be processed through the wetland process. So instead of that water running directly into a stream or a river at a fast rate of current, we can put it through a wetland. It slows it down, it spreads it out over a larger area. It gives the nutrients time to settle out and be absorbed by the plants and also the sediment.
The Crawford County Engineer's Office, they graciously brought in a little track hoe that we took down there and dug about 7 test holes to find out what the soil was like underneath, because you do need a hydric soil to help hold that water. We did find that a lot of the area down in there, unfortunately, is what we call alluvium. Basically, the river, the Sandusky River, as we see it today, was not flowing in that same spot 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. That river bounces around, it meanders back and forth through that floodplain corridor. And so, you can see it today as it, erodes away the bank and cuts these little oxbows. The next thing you know, it's flowing a different way. So where those alluvium, the deposits were, it was kind of cobbly, and so that wasn't conducive to holding water, unfortunately. So the project scope was going to be hopefully about 4 acres of wetland construction. Well, because of the soil type, that was narrowed down to about 1 acre, unfortunately, because we were able to find some hydric soils that were going to hold some water on the south end of the fields. So the wetland placement and location were predicated by the soil type below the subsoil surface.
Once the soil types were determined, a site survey was conducted, a design created, and approved. Megan Brown of the Crawford Soil and Water Conservation District conducted the survey and created the design. She walks us through the process.
So between the survey and the soil test, we were able to garner what we would be putting in, and I created the design and let my office and Josh take a look at it and see, yes, this is the direction we're looking to go for. And then our state engineer then approves, saying this is a engineering practice that he would approve. It connects to the satellites, a GPS unit. It's a rod that has the satellite receiver at the top of it that connects to the satellites, and it can give you the sea level elevations of where you have the instrument to within 100th of a square foot. So it's very accurate in that sense. And I basically did I'll call it a grid survey, where I just took a whole field, and every X amount of steps I was taking a shot, because I wanted to know what the whole field elevation was. And so I did that through the whole field. Thankfully it's a small field. And then moved over to the other side, and I also took elevations on the river where I was able to access it. Then when I have all that survey done, I can take it back to the office and upload that file, and I can overlay it onto my mapping system, my ArcGIS, for the designing, the AutoCAD program where I can shape things and draw in my wetlands over that survey design.
With an approved plan in hand, construction can now begin.
There was lots of debris from previous landowners that needed cleaned up. And so, through some great donations of Central Ohio Recycling, the Crawford County Solid Waste, the cabin guys, the Dapper Cabin guys, and, some general park volunteers, we were able to get that cleaned up and in a condition where we could then start developing it as a preserve. We got the parking lot put in 2019, and then take that back, we got the parking lot put in 2018, and from then we were able to start working on developing and getting ideas on how and what we wanted to do with the preserve. And from there we really started getting the ball rolling in 2020, in the fall 2020, with the wetland construction. And the wetlands were constructed and finished at the end of March. On April 24th, we had a huge planting day where we planted over 3,000 wetland plugs or plants. They come in little pots that we were able to pop out, but 3,000 of them went in over there. We had a great volunteer day. Over 50 volunteers showed up to assist with that project, and we were able to put those plugs in the ground in a little over 3 hours, which was awesome.
With the basic construction finished, the preserve fast became a desirable habitat. Cal Bailey, land manager for the Crawford Park District, talks about what he has observed.
Right now, I see the benefit of it. I've been going out there and doing surveys from time to time, just kind of seeing, what we have there, seeing if the flora that we planted, the plugs and things are starting to come up, and they are. So that's a good sign. There really hasn't been a lot of invasives. There's some with every property. There's going to obviously be invasives, but I just think we're at a good starting point with it. It's at a point where it's not going to be overgrown with invasives, so it's easily manageable. We're already starting to see the fruits of our labor and things coming up and sprouting, and just the wildlife starting to take over. And we had some shorebirds that, need the right type of habitat to appear. They don't just show up anywhere in solitary sandpipers. We had about 4 or 5 of those guys show up, and they stuck around for a couple months. I mean, longer than they typically do in a lot of places. Seems to be a big stakeout for swallows and what's the other one I'm thinking of? I'm sorry, chimney swifts. They seem to stage there because of the confluence of the Sandusky River, and that being a riparian zone and a bottomlands. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of them during migration. So here's one that's a fan favorite for people, the eastern bluebird. Historically, just because of the cutting of our deciduous forests and kind of losing their open forested habitat, they really suffered. So in the 70s, there were efforts or initiatives to create like bluebird trails and things, and we have one here as well. And what you want to see with a bluebird trail, obviously, is you want to see them inhabit those bird boxes. And Low Volk, we don't necessarily have the right type of habitat for them. We'll have sometimes take some of these boxes, but immediately when I placed 6 bird boxes down there, and right away I saw a pair take a box, and they had several clutches. And the other day we took the commissioners down there just to show them kind of what we've been doing, and there were probably 7, 8 fledglings. I mean, there was a whole flock of bluebirds, so that's always a welcome sight. I've seen every species of frog so far that you would want to see. I've seen spring peepers. I see green frogs every single day nearly. I've seen wood frogs, and wood frogs are a really good species indicator. They're a species that indicates just good high quality, whether it be forested areas, meaning you have a good duff layer on the forest floor. You just have a good buffer zone, meaning you have just enough area for them to have a successful population. So that's been good. There's bullfrogs down there, green frogs. I mean, immediately we were seeing, tadpoles in the vernal pools, dragonflies are flying around, butterflies. I've been out there documenting butterflies. So we're seeing pollinators and things like that out there, and that's what you would expect to see once you plant the native plants. Actually, one of the best findings or sightings that I found was this spring. I almost forgot about it, and I found a golden winged warbler. They do nest in Ohio, but their population's dwindling because we have a blue-winged warbler and they hybridize, and so their genetics are just kind of going to the wayside. So seeing one of those on the property, that's great. That means they could be breeding here in the future. Any given day you go down there, you'll see, deer probably pretty abundantly. I'll usually be doing work and they don't notice me, and then I'll just step on a twig or something and it snaps, and I'll jump the family or something. So they're pretty plentiful. I've seen groundhogs down there. So, we have definitely a good mammal inventory going. Your typical squirrels that you'd see, gray squirrels. We got fox squirrels. I've seen red squirrels, all the squirrels that you would see, ground squirrels. So the typical mammal herbivory types. I haven't seen, firsthand skunks and raccoons, but I can only imagine, because they kind of like that riparian bottomland area, that they're definitely going to be there. I've seen signs of raccoons. I've seen their scat. I just physically haven't seen them, and that could be, I haven't really gone out there at night yet. Hawks, yeah, I see and hear red-tailed hawks almost daily. They're standing vigil up in their perches in the trees. From time to time, you'll hear barred owls. That's an apex predator as well. I believe that you've obviously seen coyotes there, and I'm sure they're around. I just personally haven't seen them myself. So, but it's a good forested habitat. I know. with the bottomland and everything, I think there's about 40 to 50 acres, so it's good buffer zone habitat. There's a lot of forested habitat around that isn't necessarily ours, but it's contiguous, so they can roam around and come and go, and it's really close to low volt. So yeah, I mean, it's a diverse fauna population there. Everything that you would kind of expect to see out in a wild life area, nature center, park area is what we're finding over there, and that's a good sign.
After the excavation was done and the planning completed, the preserve needed some additional work so the public could enjoy it. Trails were planned and cut, stairs were constructed from the parking level down to the floodplain, and a boardwalk was constructed. In October of 2021, an opening ceremony was held. In addition to the park staff, the event was attended by the Lieutenant Governor, the directors of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, the Crawford County Commissioners, and various other state and local officials. The park is now open to the public 365 days a year from dawn until dusk. For more information, visit the Crawford Park District Facebook page or visit the website at crawfordparkdistrict.org.